prologue of your book, what made you decide to choose that particular story? Like, what made you, choose like that particular event to like lead into like the whole story itself?
That's a very good question. So I was, really struggling to figure out how I'm going to convey so much that's very intellectual and, you know, um, to a great extent, and just make it relatable. How can you actually connect with important themes and important topics that too often are discussed in very dry ways or in very dramatic sort of newsy ways? How do you make it relatable? How do you make all of that relatable? And as a writer, um, I've always gotten this piece of feedback from friends who are familiar with my work. They call me Mr. Analogy because I love using analogies. And I figured, okay, well, screw it. What if I actually embraced that and I did become Mr. Analogy and tried to come up with a metaphor? What would be the most powerful metaphor? And interestingly, the more that I thought about it, the more that I struggled. And so what eventually happened is that the metaphor found me. And I realized the most powerful metaphor would be one about heartbreak. Because who hasn't gone through heartbreak? Who hasn't gone through some kind of disillusionment or betrayal? And that really stuck with me because, coming of age, that whole process, it's really a process of losing innocence and waking up to the real world and its nastiness. And then trying to reconcile and figure things. Well, is the world a nasty place fundamentally? Are people nasty fundamentally? Or are they good? They just go through crappy circumstances. So that loss of innocence was also something that really factored in. And then as a writer, you just start to get creative. Well, how do you grab the reader's attention in a dramatic way and really grip them from the very beginning of the book? How do you set the tone of the book? And so I figured that sentence, I don't have it here in front of me, but I guess it goes like, he smacked her across the face a loud, thundering slap. And the television seemed to reverberate with the impact, right? Like, holy crap, wait, who's he and who is she? And why are we starting with like, some violent scene? And I wanted to use that sentence to set the tone because frankly, I wanted to have a book that's just gonna be in your face, pretty direct, very raw, and quite visceral. And I wanted to trigger those reactions in the reader. And then from there, of course, you lead into the metaphor about the marriage and the divorce, and we can connect with that metaphor in a way that is non-metaphorical whatsoever, in a way that is actually real. And we can also see it as a metaphor. And so setting the tone that way really colors the flavor of the narrative and the story throughout the book. And now I'm not just talking about religion and doctrines and faith and belief in this sort of abstract way, but it becomes very real because you believe something and then you realize either it was a lie or maybe you believed it in a very simplistic way and it was actually a lot more complex. And it just shakes up your whole sense of existence and it leaves you heartbroken. And then by doing that, another thing that happens is the reader feels the journey along with you, and they feel the highs, they feel the lows. One of the most gratifying things that I heard from readers was that some people cried reading the book, and I was very moved by that because it means that I did a decent, good job, as a writer, I guess. I think I failed in some aspects, but that was really the main thing is I didn't want people to just walk away with some new intellectual knowledge. I wanted them to be touched and moved. And one of the other gratifying things that happened is a lot of the feedback, surprisingly for me initially, came from older American Christians or former Christians or Christians who now have a new understanding of Christianity. And I'm like, Christians? Why would they even relate? And then you realize, wait a second, the faith journey is very similar in many ways. The content of the faith might be different. The symbols might be different. But the structure of the journey is very much the same. And so that's why I really wanted to use that metaphor. And That's why I started with that sentence.